The following stories are from members of Hanmaum Church in South Korea. They aired on a Korean Christian TV network called C Channel and were dubbed in English. Hello, I'm Jin-Gyeong from Hanmaum Church in Chuncheon. I was someone who had lost all meaning in life because of my dad's severe drinking problem. Then I met the risen Jesus and came to live a life filled with hope, serving other souls. I'd like to share my testimony with you. I'm the youngest of 3 children. As an upright child, I grew up with the love and approval of my family and relatives. Since I was also independent and a good student, I was showered with compliments. At school, friends and teachers also gave me a lot of recognition, and I had a pretty happy life. But because of my dad's severe drinking habits, I began to gradually lose that happiness. When my dad was a boy, he had lost his father to the Korean War. He had a very hard life growing up with only his mom and as the eldest of 3 kids. They didn't have enough to eat, so he'd eat the dregs left over from rice wine and go to school drunk. To make money, he even ended up fighting in the Vietnam War. Then he became a government worker at the railway to support his mom. People praised him for being a good son. But he began to drink from the stress of having to take care of his wayward brother's mistakes. My dad's post was at a railroad intersection. After he was done working his night shift, he'd often come home drunk. When he came home drunk, he'd get angry at every little thing and harass my mom. If he touched even a single drink, he'd end up drinking all night long, and he'd say all kinds of filthy swears and resort to violence. On some days, he'd try to go out with the car keys completely drunk. Then I had to be the one begging him to stop as I shook with fear. One time, I couldn't stop him. My dad ended up taking my mom to her mother's house in the car. Once they were there, he caused a scene and my aunt had to go to the emergency room. Not only that, but my mom's face was black and blue with bruises from my dad's assault. When I saw that, I genuinely wanted to kill him. My heart was filled with rage against him because my dad had abused her after she'd come home tired from working morning to midnight stringing fish, which is what my mom did during winters. My dad always did whatever he felt like. If he called the house and no one answered, he smashed the phone after he got home. So whether we were at the market or the public bath, we felt anxious and had to come back home as soon as we could. He'd regularly throw sake bottles at windows and break them. One time, he threw the ashtray at the door and smashed it in. One day, he tried to throw a huge rock at my grandmother, and the neighbors had to stop him. I could not understand why my dad was like this, and I hated that this was my life. As my hatred for my dad and despair about my life grew, I no longer smiled. My mom was suffering because of my dad, so she didn't smile either. My older sister clashed with our dad a lot. As a result, the gash in her heart grew bigger and bigger. When my older brother became a teenager, he spent most of his time outside the house. I thought that for my mom's sake, I should be doing okay at least. So even though I was the youngest, I became her shadow, helping with housework, farm work, and even grocery shopping. My mom had stopped smiling a long time ago, but if she ever smiled, I was so glad. One day, I felt so badly for my mom that I asked her, "Why don't you run away?" She said that she didn't because my dad would come after her to the ends of the earth and kill her and us too. When she said that, I broke down inside. I couldn't see a shred of hope for our family. Later on, I grabbed my drunken father and wept as I said, "Why did you ever bring us into the world if you were going to be this way?" But my dad didn't change at all, and I eventually became a living corpse. Eating, going to school, studying, it all became meaningless. I just wanted to die. I had no one to rely on, though I was having such a hard time inside, so I writhed alone. I joined the Buddhist club at my school and went to the temple every Sunday. I would sit cross-legged and listen to the beating of the wooden fish as I sought to collect myself through my despair. On some days, I'd go down to the beach and try to let the sound of the waves wash away the frustrations in my heart. At school, I would enviously stare at the branches of the birch tree swaying in the wind as I thought, "You're lucky. You have no worries." Once I found a four-leaf clover, and for a moment I found happiness, but it was difficult to mend a heart that had already fallen apart. In this way, I wandered, my heart unable to find a place to rest. Then I entered a teacher's college and met members from Hanmaum Church. I couldn't see hope due to my frustrating reality, and they helped me to think about Jesus. They didn't try to force their beliefs on me. They said I should try to determine whether Jesus was trustworthy myself. That seemed undemanding and respectful, so I warmed to them. When I was told that Jesus was a person who had actually existed in history, it was quite a big shock to me. I had learned about the establishment of Christianity in the Middle Ages, but I didn't know anything about a person named Jesus. So for the first time in my life, I began to read the Bible and focus on facts about Jesus. I tried to understand the Bible with my mind and feel it in my heart. That was why every word in it became a stumbling block to me. As I read Romans 1, I thought, if even gossiping deserves death, no one's innocent. I felt like God had made everyone out to be sinners and was demanding that they believe in Him. My heart wouldn't open up to Him because I felt like God was being unreasonable and imposing Himself on me with the Bible, just like my dad, who had done whatever he felt like. Also, the things Jesus said didn't make any sense. He had living relatives right there, but this 30-something-year-old man was saying that he was the light of the world and the bread of life. When he said that he was the God that the Jews so devoutly believed in and followed, he truly seemed like a crazy person. The more I read the Bible, the harder I found it to believe in Jesus. But I thought about how, if God really did exist, I could go to hell, so I had to keep thinking about this issue. Sometime later, I attended the church retreat. I heard a lot about the resurrection, but I had more pressing dilemmas. How could Jesus have been God and a human being at the same time? How could He have lived without sin? Why is this world supposed to be darkness? Am I that bad of a sinner? Why can't I feel the love of God? I had so many things I couldn't understand or feel, so the resurrection was at the bottom of my priority list. But I heard the pastor say, the resurrection of Jesus is a historical event that actually happened. If the resurrection is true, then you can say amen to all the words in the Bible. Then I was able to focus on the resurrection. I thought, Jesus was severely whipped, lost all His blood, and was pierced and crushed. But they said He rose back to life. How could a dead person rise back to life? And this was written into history books, not novels or children's stories? If the resurrection is true, that means Jesus isn't crazy, and that He really is the God who came to this earth. At that moment, the resurrection became real to me, and I began to tremble inside and out. God really is alive. He had made it so that someone who couldn't believe, like me, could believe that Jesus is God, through a sure proof that no one in the history of mankind could imitate: the resurrection. When the resurrection became real to me, I clearly saw what sin was. I had stabbed and killed my dad countless times in my heart, as I blamed God with thoughts like, "Why did you let me be born into this family? Why did you give me a father like him?" But even so, I thought I could go to heaven because I was a good person while living completely as my own Lord. But Jesus had died for someone like me on a cross. The wage of sin was death, so I had to die. But Jesus had received all of that wrath on behalf of me. In that way, he had completely taken care of the entire problem of sin and risen again as the proof we can believe with. But I'd still been saying, I'll believe if I realize something more. I'll believe if I feel something more, and not believed in Jesus till the end. In regard to sin, because men do not believe in me. Jesus had died and risen again to become my Lord. But because I hadn't believed, I had hated and blamed my dad. God made this Jesus, whom I, Jin-Gyeong, crucified, both Lord and Christ. What should I do? I had killed God the Son. I couldn't even bring myself to ask for forgiveness. But, look, I stand outside and knock. I stand outside and knock. At these words, my walls broke down. God, how can you forgive me when I killed your son? You're asking me to eat with you and live with you? You want to become the Lord of someone like me? Telling me to repent was the unimaginable, impossible love of God. I surrendered to this crazy, impossible love of God, and I repented the sin of not having believed in Jesus all this time and living as the Lord of myself according to my thoughts and feelings, and I accepted the risen Jesus as my true Lord. After that, God poured into me a hope for heaven. I used to be like a living corpse, but He helped me understand and delight in His words, a sentence at a time, with the resurrection as their key. I had thought that the reality I saw was all there was, but there really had been an unseen eternal kingdom. Because of the Lord of that eternal kingdom had come into me, I was someone who already had everything. I had thought that I couldn't rely on anyone for the burdens in my heart, but I had so many eternal family members of heaven who were one with me in Jesus. Because God was our Father, I felt so secure that I could trust Him with all of my worries. I had hated my dad, but that monstrous self had died with Jesus, and now I had become a new being who even loved her enemies. There were so many things God had given me to delight in that I spent every day in thankfulness and joy, recovering the laughter I had lost. After my heart recovered in this way, I came to embrace my dad, whom I had blamed and hated, with love. I thought about how hard it must have been for him, cleaning up after his brother's mistakes by himself. He had tried to find some solace by drinking. How frustrated he must have been with his unyielding circumstances. I felt so badly for the life my dad had lived, and I realized that God loved my dad more than life itself, so I came to truly love my dad. But not long after that, I received word that my dad had lost consciousness. My dad was barely alive on a respirator. I was told that people could still hear up to the moment they died, so I took my dad's hand as I prayed inside. I said, "Dad, can you hear me? Jesus died and rose again to become your Lord. You had a hard time because you lived as your own Lord. You and we'd all been deceived. Believe in the risen Jesus now, okay? I'll see you again in heaven. I'm so sorry for hating you all this time, Dad. I love you." And I entrusted my dad to God. After seeing my dad off to heaven, I began to take notice of other souls. I was watching all the people leave to go on their hometowns for the Thanksgiving holidays, and my heart broke as I thought, but there's no one going to see God. How lonely he must feel. I teach elementary school, and I came to pray more desperately for the children and other teachers. When God's love was poured into me, I was able to understand and care for the children's hearts. I also served the other teachers with joy. One year, I was teaching 5th grade, and we had an activity where the kids each wrote down a wish. Then one child had written, "I wish my stepdad wouldn't come home." When I talked to him, I found out that there were problems in his family. Perhaps due to being hurt by those problems, the boy had severe gaming addiction. He also fought often with other kids. I felt like I was seeing myself in him when I had been a child without hope, and my heart ached for him. I served him with love and prayed earnestly for him. Perhaps due to the prayers, the child began to change in amazing ways. His hard eyes began to soften, and he began to smile. He quit gaming altogether, and he said that he wasn't ashamed of his drinking and smoking mom anymore. I couldn't help but confess, God, thank you so much for saving this child. After that, I looked after the kids with even more love and care. Perhaps the kids saw my intentions, because they began to visit my classroom for one excuse or another even after school. I would listen to them as they talked about things they normally hadn't had a chance to share. I would help them with their problems, and we'd play board games too. In this way, the kids and I grew close quite fast. Kids who used to be expressionless began to find joy. As that happened, seemingly impossible problems like ostracizing, suicide, and even issues about romance became resolved, and I was so glad. One of the teachers, who was a heavy drinker, became a believer of Jesus after watching me with the students. As this teacher spent time with the church body, she said that she didn't have a reason to drink anymore and quit, and she came to have a heavenly hope with us too. God came to find me when I was like a living corpse, and He became my living hope. Now, the suffering He allowed me to go through is a precious asset in enabling me to understand and embrace the hearts of others. Amen. God, you let me meet the risen Jesus, who is the Lord of everything in my life. You turned me into someone who has everything and serves souls, living a life filled with hope. I love you, God. I will live the rest of my life walking with the Lord and making Him happy, together with my church body. Thank you. If you'd like to see more stories about how the gospel changed lives, visit us at facebook.com/HMUOnlyJesus or Google us at HMU Only Jesus.